COVID, I lost both parents in 2 weeks. A woman was described the horrified horrified anguish. A woman has described the horrified anguish of losing both parents to COVID just 2 weeks apart. Ray and Rosemary Scoville. Ray and Rosemary Scoville from Sandon on the Isle of Wight.
Ray and Rosemary Scoville from Sandon on the Isle of Wight.
Ray and Rosemary Scoville from Sandon on the Isle of Wight had been looking forward to their golden wedding and anniversary when Ray 76 fell ill. Their daughter Claire Apsey and grandson Simon said their grief had been compounded by lockdown. Their grief had been compounded by lockdown. Compound. Compound. A chemical that combines two or more elements. Combination. Compound. Their daughter Claire Apsey. Their daughter Claire Apsey and grandson Simon said their grief had been compounded by lockdown. Mrs. Apsey said she also felt guilty for being unable to give them the send-off they deserved. The couple grew up in the same street and were well known on the island after a lifetime dedicated to helping others. The couple grew up in the same street and were well known on the island after a lifetime dedicated to helping others. Mr. Scoville, who was a hammer coach at Isles of Wight Athletics Club, set up numerous sports initiatives for schools, and was responsible for bringing events such as Parkrun to the island. His 73-year-old wife supported his work, which included organizing medals. Mrs. Apsey said that throughout lockdown, her father continued to encourage children to go running and send out certificates to keep them motivated. He would also do errands for elderly neighbors, leaving shopping in their porches. They always wanted to do the best for people, she said, always thinking of helping others. In recent times, Mrs. Scoville suffered from short-term memory loss. On the 8th of January, When Mr. Scoville was admitted to hospital, Mrs. Epsey and Simon 14 moved into care for her. While Dad was in hospital, we were having to explain kids to her, which is hard because she kept forgetting. And when Dad died, she would forget, so we would have to explain again, Mrs. Ramsey said, adding she was heartbroken. Although she was allowed to be with her father when he died, Mrs. Ramsey said she was grown up and had to wear a face shield. It wasn't the ending we wanted, she said. A little over a week after losing her husband, Mrs. Scoville ended up in the hospital after a fall. 8 weeks revealed she had inflammation on her lungs and she tested positive for COVID-19. She died 5 days later. Mrs. Epsey said she went very quickly. She had a pulmonary embolism.
Pulmonary embolism.
Pulmonary embolism. She added, "It's been horrifying, really. The hardest thing is not being able to share the grief."
Pulmonary embolism.
Embolism. Pulmonary
embolism.
Pulmonary embolism. She had a pulmonary embolism. The funeral arrangements and contact with the solicitors, which had to be done via email, had also been so clinical, Mrs. Ramsey said. When we had my dad's funeral, I felt so guilty there were only 30 people there, she added. It felt so warm because my dad was so well known. We were inundated with cars and flowers. She added they had both received the most wonderful care at St. Mary's Hospital, which had given her and Simon great comfort. Coronavirus: how the UK dealt with its first COVID case. It is exactly 12 months since Meadows summoned to what became the first confirmed case of COVID-19 in the UK. A year on, the BBC has spoken to the people who found themselves at the center of the drama. It was a Wednesday afternoon when a 23-year-old Chinese national called the NHS 111 phone line from his hotel room in York City Centre. The University of York students, known in medical journals only as B, was suffering with a fever, a dry cough, and muscle pain. His 50-year-old mother, A, who had flown to the UK from Wuhan in Hubei province a week earlier, was also feeling unwell with a fever, cough, and sore throat.
Sore throat.
Sore throat. When she arrived in the UK, coronavirus had spread from the Chinese province to countries including Thailand and the US, with some 500 confirmed cases and 17 dead. On the 23rd of January, the date patient A landed in the UK with the student's father, Wuhan, and its population of 11 million people became the first in the world to enter coronavirus lockdown. On the evening of the 29th of January, two paramedics from the Yorkshire ambulance service were called to the 196-room Stay City apartment hotel in Paragon Street, York, dressed in white hermit suits. They told reception staff they were responding to a potential coronavirus case before heading to a first floor room. Until then, there had been a lot of suspected cases, but none that had been confirmed. Because Keith Freeman, City's chief operating officer, you were hoping in the back of your head that is another false alarm. You are also thinking, what are the chances? But once he found out one of the guests had flown in from Wuhan, the world's coronavirus capital, his team started to panic a bit. At that point, it was about trying to just be quick, level-headed, and operational. To work out what the next steps would be,
Unbeknownst.
unbeknownst to staff at Stay City,
Stay City.
paramedics left the hotel with the family about 20 minutes after arriving. Slapping out of a fire exit to the waiting ambulance from Paragon Street. They were taken to the regional infectious diseases to the regional infectious disease unit at Castle Hill Hospital near Hull. 30 miles away, Nick Essom and Samson and Patrick Neal, all specialists in infectious disease, had been at a retirement dinner when they were suddenly called back. Rather than feeling apprehensive, apprehensive,
Apprehensive.
apprehensive, apprehensive.
Apprehensive.
Apprehensive means feeling worried about something that you are going to do or that is going to happen. Apprehensive. Apprehensive. Rather than feeling apprehensive, Dr. Asum recalled some excitement at the possibility of seeing the UK's first suspected coronavirus case. He had to send a colleague to buy him an electric razor, allowing him to trim his bed to ensure his personal protective equipment would fit properly. Electric razor. Electric razor.
Electric razor. Electric razor.
Electric razor.
Razor.
Razor. Rather than feeling apprehensive, Dr. Ism, because some excitement as the possibility of seeing the UK's first suspected coronavirus case. He had to send a colleague to buy him an electric razor, allowing him to trim his bed to ensure his personal protective equipment would fit properly. Just days earlier, He and his colleagues had agreed that a handful of cases in the UK was to be expected, but it would be slightly unusual if we saw any in home. We thought in all likelihood we would get them in and test them, and it would be a dry run to make sure all our processes were working well, he says. The next day, the mother and son tested positive for coronavirus, the first people to do so in the UK. Dr. Sampson had been about to go to sleep when she received the news. I did not really know what to expect, she said. At that point, we knew this was something big and it was bigger than just us. But we never really expected that it would take over the world in the way that it did. She remembers thinking how incredibly well the patients looked with only a bit of a fever and some flu-like symptoms. I could see straight away there was nothing here we needed to do. We just needed to make sure they wouldn't contaminate anyone else. At the hotel, Mr. Freeman's team was anxiously seeking information following the paramedics' visit. By now, members of the press were gathering by the minute on the pavement outside the hotel, talking to guests as they came and went. On the 30th of January, Mr. Freeman asked the Public Health England if the hotel needed to close and remembers being told, "We don't want anyone to be fearful. It is only suspected. Just don't go near the room." He was told it would be 48 hours before more information was available, but the following day, as he brought a flight home from Edinburgh, he received a call telling him to the worst. The tests were positive. The flight, he said, was the longest hour of my life. As soon as he landed, he was straight back on the phone to formulate a plan for breaking the news to guests. On the back foot, also battling for information was York's Director of Public Health, Sharon Stoltz. Sharon Stoltz, who learned of the potential outbreak from a local newspaper report. It quoted a woman who had seen a man in the back of an ambulance wearing a mask surrounded by paramedics in white quarantine suits. The city, like the rest of the UK, was already on high alert. Miss Stoltz Day, but office, but of, but officials, but officials' confirmation of the suspected case did not arrive until later. Everything was being controlled centrally, and the media were faster than the official communication channels, which was a real headache for us, she said. Having to wait put Miss Stoltz and her colleagues on the back foot, she says, making it harder to manage residents' growing fear and anxiety. I felt it was important that we were as transparent as possible and could share as much information as possible, she says. They wanted to share little, I wanted to share more. There was a little bit of tension at the start. When PHE publicly confirmed the two cases in the city on the 31st of January, University of York Vice Chancellor Prof. Charlie Jeffrey was 500 miles away from home in the Dutch city of Maastricht. A photo taken during an academic parade through the streets captures him taking calls from a colleague in the UK. It was to inform him that one of York's coronavirus patients was a student at the university. Despite the distance, he was prepared. Just a week earlier, a group had been set up to plan the university's response to any potential outbreak. He arrived back in York the next day, and before the operations linked to the university were made public, assigned an incident room on campus, including staff, students, union officials, and experts in biology, medicine, and virologic. A moment of uncertainty. Later that afternoon, the university called a press conference, and Prof. Jeffrey spoke to reassure people the students had not visited the campus, situated about 2 miles outside the city, but rumors were already flying. Fingers started to point at the students seen crouching in a lecture days earlier, and the university had to work very, very quickly and carefully to make sure people kept things in perspective and knew all that they could know about the situation, Prof. Jeffrey says. Standing by his side at the press conference was Samara Jones, president of the Students' Union. She had been preparing for a netball match that morning when she learned of the operations linked to the university. Within hours, she was facing the world's media. In the days leading up to it, there had been a lot of rumors. She said, I think people had seen something, but no one was quite sure. By this stage, the virus, now known as 2019 novel coronavirus, was linked to 304 deaths in China, with 294 in Hubei province. Despite the press conference, Ms. Strong said some students were still nervous. Speaking at the time, one told the BBC she was scared and had started wearing a face mask on campus, though others said it was business as usual. In an effort to combat some of the concerns, the university repurposed its admissions call center to handle queries from worried students and their parents. As more details emerged, the mother and son were moved again, this time to the high-level isolation unit at the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle. PHE said the risk to the public was low, but pressure was mounting to trace the family's exact movements. Chinese New Year celebrations had been taking place in York that week, and the city was gearing up to welcome thousands of tourists for its annual ice trial. Will Zhong, president of the York Chinese Association, said the community had been talking all the time about the virus, swapping stories from their relatives back home, and debating the need to wear a face mask. To mark the year of the rat, a gala attended by local dignitaries, families, and students had been held at the Brampton, next door to the State City Hotel. There was widespread concern when news of cases in York began to break. We became extremely nervous at that time. Would it really be a breakout in York? Mr. Strong June. Mr. June said, not just these two from the same family, but spread out in the university. Everybody was talking about who they are. Back at the hotel, with the case now confirmed, Mr. Freeman and his staff had basically tried to deal with guests angry at having been kept in the dark. Like Miss Stowes, Mr. Freeman felt PHE had been less than forthcoming with information, and with hindsight, wishes he had told customers about the suspected cases. The world is frustrated. It felt like we were trying to get more information and we couldn't get it, he says. Criticism of the hotel had made a difficult time even tougher, he said, but staff had acted with every right intention from the information from PHE. Dr. Mike Drance, PhD Deputy PhD Deputy Director for Youngshine and Humber, said managing and sharing information at the time had been very difficult. Do I think that the communication was right throughout the incident to everybody that was involved? I would probably say probably not. He says now, in any national emergency, you will find a degree of national interest and control, and you just have to accept that. A UK issue now, fears were now growing globally as images emerged of the empty streets in Wuhan and cases were confirmed in more and more countries. It was also discovered that the students had stayed of light as the Ritter students' accommodation block in Norton Street, a building used by students at the University of York and at John University, with the eyes of the nation trained on the city. PHE and Proof Jeffrey moved quickly to offer reassurance. It was a challenge to manage anxieties, he says. They were not just anxieties within the university or universities, and not just anxieties within the city of York. This was a moment when it became clear in the UK that what had been a little bit abstract, something happening in China, in Italy, was now an issue for the UK. 80 miles north in Newcastle, the student and his mother were making a steady recovery. According to medical reports, PHE identified 52 individuals who had come into contact with them, including test drivers, hotel staff, and 45 healthcare workers. None tested positive for coronavirus. By the 4th of February, the pair were symptom-free. They tested negative the next day and were discharged on the 17th of February. The student's father also tested negative throughout despite being in close contact. No further cases were recorded. No further cases were recorded in York until the 6th of March, more than 5 weeks later. The identities of A and B have remained a mystery ever since. Union leader Miss Jones said she never learned the student's name and was somewhat happy that way. I think there were some people that knew, but I think the student body very much respected the fact they were just another student and they didn't want everyone knowing that it was them. While the outbreak in York appeared to have been successfully contained, 12 months on, the number of positive cases in the UK is more than 3.7 million. Dr. Lily, one of the specialists from Hull and a principal investigator for the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine trial, asked, "I do not think anyone could have guessed that night when we had the first couple of cases that it was going to be like this. You would have to have had a crystal ball. It's hard to get away from. It's very it's very tiring, but I think the light at the end of the tunnel is getting closer. Tunnel is getting closer. We are lost there, but it's coming."